Well, these rookies have been invited with the Cowboys. They are now part of this football team, and they have a chance to make an impact for America's team going into 2023. The best and worst case scenarios for some of your Cowboys rookies going into this upcoming season. Shout out to the Cowboys. They started mini camp.
Organized team activities, actually.
Yeah, OTAs, that's right.
Organized team activities, because it is the nebulous off-season time, but you have a certain period of time where you can do team activities. What activities? Don't worry. It's kind of just amorphous, just stuff. But they are organized. They're not disorganized. They organize.
If nothing else,
team
structured
activity.
Organized. On time.
All right.
Discipline.
Yes.
All the words.
Any other thesaurus words?
Shout out to the Cowboys. Mandatory minicamp next week.
Thank you.
Next week.
The non-mandatory time, the optional of these, Micah Parsons was there for. Worth noting.
Shout out to him.
Yeah. But yes, when we talk about your draft picks and for the 2023 draft class for the Dallas Cowboys, let's do it that way. Let's go in order. Clearly, your first round pick is Mazi Smith, defensive tackle. What do you think is the best case scenario for what he ends up being this starting season?
Defensive rookie of the year.
Oh, wow. You think that's capable? Come on. You said
best case scenario, right?
Realistic best case scenario, dude. What are you doing? Like, defensive tackle not winning best rookie of the year.
How you know? Why can't he?
Let's pull up the defensive.
Don't do that. You don't have to do that.
Oh, I don't?
No, you don't have to do that.
No, the Google has already started, buddy.
The point is, we're gonna reach for the stars, and hit the whatever the saying is, reach for the moon, hit the stars, something like that. That sounds cute.
Shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you will land amongst the stars. Is the idea.
All right, that sounds good. Okay.
You want to know the last time a defensive tackle won rookie of the year?
I'm gonna guess 2018 with Vita Vea.
2014, Aaron Donald.
Of course he did.
Year before that, Sheldon Richardson, and in 2010, Ndamukong Suh. You think that he has the capability of being any of them cats?
Sheldon Richardson won a defensive rookie of the year from the defensive tackle position?
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Mazi ZOU. That's right.
Okay. All right. That's right. You think he got any of those guys in him? Especially considering that the idea is the pass rush is a unlockable feature as opposed to stock. Like, that's an upgrade.
I mean, one's a Hall of Famer. Ndamukong Suh at one point was considered the best defensive tackle, or one of the best defensive tackles in the game, respectively to Aaron Rodgers' foot. And then Sheldon Richardson flamed out, unfortunately. Had a decent career, but not great. Realistically for Mazi Smith, if he can be a 2 to 3 down player, clog up the middle, free up things for these linebackers, these edge guys to be able to handle things on the outside and get to the quarterback a little bit and stop the run. Yeah, that's your ceiling. If he can get 2 to 3 sacks from the defensive tackle spot as well, increase his pass rush and be able to get better from there, I think that's very realistic for him. 2 to 4 sacks from the middle, but more so being a run stuffer that allows Micah Parsons and these guys to get after things on the edges and on the outside, stopping the run.
You match what our friend Dan Rogers at Blogging the Boys says is best case scenario, basically immediate starter, starter, and then eventual Pro Bowler. Probably not this season, but over time. Worst case scenario, he says, is just a rotational player.
That would be the worst case scenario, because what he cannot be is a version of Neville Gallimore.
Yeah.
Any of these guys that you have seen in the rotation for the last few years. He has got to stand out along with Jonathan Hankins as your two best defensive tackles in the middle. I know Osa's had some flashes at times for the Cowboys, but Hankins and Mazi Smith have to be your 2 best interior linemen going into 2023.
Okay. Somebody says if Mazi can get 6 sacks and is top 10 in pressures, should be a phenomenal year. Okay. The 6 sacks, I feel like we asking for a lot there.
I think that's a lot.
But if you can, I get what you're saying, right? If you can get him upfield and actually pass rushing, if you can add that to his bag early, that'd be a great year for you. That might be a little unrealistic in my perspective, but the idea that he has that opportunity to add that over the course of his first few years in his rookie contract, I think that's really the idea. Let's move along.
Agreed.
Luke Schoonmaker, tight end. Best case scenario is what, KG, in your mind?
Becomes your number 1 tight end. Here's the thing. He's 25 years old? coming in.
Yeah, he's a little bit on the older end.
But still has some opportunities for development within, obviously, this offense, but as a player as well.
24.
24, okay. So he should be your best blocking tight end, a safety blanket for Dak Prescott, and hopefully becomes a reliable pass catcher within this offense. You still got, Peyton Hendershot, Jake Ferguson there, growing and developing under Lunda Wells, the tight ends coach for this team.
Mm-hmm.
But for Schoonmaker becoming the number one tight end, you don't draft a tight end in the second round and not believe at some point he becomes your number one tight end.
Sure. In the first year, the tough thing about it, though, is there's not a lot of tight ends that produce at a high level in their first season. So the idea of if he becomes your number one right tight end, I agree. If he can produce in that first season, you won, right? Because that's just something that does not happen a ton. And you can also point to the idea that Jake Ferguson kind of did a little bit of the producing. Obviously, he had to be secondary, maybe even tertiary, depending on how you view it, considering that Dalton Schultz is there. But yeah, Dalton Schultz doppelganger is the way that Blogging the Boys puts it. If he can come in and be that high upside player and do some of those things, yeah, that's cool. Worst case scenario, year one Sean McEwen role, which would be so terrifying. Like he just finds himself in the sea of that tight end room and just one of the tight ends after the Hendershot pairing.
Definitely worst case scenario there.
But I don't think that's, even in that worst case scenario, I don't think that that's awful because there's, again, the understanding that rookie tight ends don't always produce and they could still flourish. Now, if he stays in that role, should he find himself in that role, that's where you get into a real problem.
Well, I guess the problem is you draft him in the second round, which means you're telling me that he's ready to produce now. First and second round picks in my mind.
Well, he's ready to play. Ready to produce. That's the thing I keep saying about
ready to play and produce. Like, if you're spending that kind of capital on that position, where normally you can find terrific tight ends in the third, fourth, and fifth rounds of NFL drafts, he's got to step in right away and produce for you, given where you decided to take him at when you didn't necessarily have to take a tight end at all in that particular.
Shout out to the homie Vach Lombardi, who's on the YouTube 105 through the fan.
What's up, Vach?
Who mentioned that Mazi's the best athlete we have at defensive tackle. The pass rush upside is there. And when we start talking about evaluating big men, guys in the trenches, Vach is really good at that. Check him out on YouTube, Vach Lombardi, The Volume, all those things. And that's the thing that we've heard a lot, is that Mazi Smith has a lot of upside, particularly when it comes to pass rush.
He's so strong. My
thing about it is just like kind of tempering a little bit of expectations that that's going to be their day one, or even, at midway through the season, right? I believe that, and I have hope that he can get to that place early, but just tempering that expectation that, okay, I don't think that that's something that we should say is a deal breaker if it's not there immediately. That was my point there. But yeah, appreciate you, Vox, for making that note, because it's always good to hear from you. How about DeMarvion Overshown, linebacker out of Texas? What do you view as the best case scenario for the linebacker?
Can come in, be a special teams contributor, maybe see some spot, play. Not going to play a lot, I would think, but he gives you speed, athleticism, kind of that hybrid role, if you will. But I don't expect him to be a significant contributor right away for the Cowboys in that way.
KG, you're spot on with what our guy at Blogging the Boys says. Linebacker 3, special teams ace, right?
Yeah.
Like an idea, a dude that just pops on the screen, or pops off the screen rather, when it comes to special teams plays, and then a dude who gives you, like you said, those spot snaps when you get Leighton Vander Esch and Damone Clark off the field. That's because obviously those two guys seem to be your starters when it comes to linebackers. So an idea of a guy who's going to be in that rotation in a lesser capacity, and then also where it is the opportunity to get on the field is special teams.
By the way, Jabril Cox would love, hello.
Yeah, and that's the worst case scenario of this, is like a Jabril Cox-like development project. Because Jabril Cox didn't. Am I misremembering?
He was going to come in here and bring all this speed.
Yeah, the idea was that that might come along a little bit earlier, but Jabril Cox ended up being some level of development. I understand he was coming off an injury, but it ended up being in this place where it's like, oh, this might take a little while to come along, and you would hate to have another one of those guys in DeMarvion Overshown, and of course that is the way that we do, or that's the way that we set the worst case scenario, because that would be devastating to have another player that you have in that particular room, in the same room, that is not quite ready, because you need these guys to come in and be some level of help in the linebacker room. How about Junior Fihoko before we go? Defensive line addition.
Depth piece. I mean, you've got a lot of guys in front of him right now that you're still hoping to get something from. We're talking about Hankins. We're talking about Mazi Smith utilizing the first round. Osa's still there. You still got Neville Gallimore. There's a lot of guys that are in front of him to try and make an impact. It's going to be difficult for him. But Dan Quinn likes him. He's got a plan for him. And Dan Quinn I trust, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a real narrow window on this because best case scenario is that he's a key rotational player. And the worst case scenario is that he just kind of gets lost in the depth. Anyone else that you want to mention, or we feel like that it?
I got to touch on Deuce Vaughn.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah.
You want me to give you what it says here?
Yeah.
Solid volume Darren Sproles type role is the best case scenario, right? A guy that you can just bring in to be explosive. And obviously last season he had 4 plays of 60-plus yards. All right, so runs low to the ground, all those things, right? Slasher makes defenders miss. If he can come in and give you that in key instances with a decent amount of volume, that's the best case scenario. And the worst case scenario is that you just don't really see 42 on the floor or on the turf too much, right? Because the idea of Tony Pollard getting a lot of runs and carries, and then you spot him with Ronald Jones, and you just don't really see Darren Sproles, Deuce Vaughn on the field.
And we're not maybe seeing him in the return game either.
When
it comes to
that's interesting because I'm thinking about this entirely under the running back situation.
Special teams,
special teams. Yeah, if he can pop there and maybe even continue entirely dethrone Kamonte Turpin. Question mark.
Which will be interesting to see how they play that out when it comes to mandatory minicamp and training camp. Because I don't think as of now Kamonte Turpin should be threatened by the idea that he'll lose his job as the primary kick returner and punt returner. But would love to see some opportunities for Deuce Vaughn to see what he can do in the open field.
That's what training camp's for.
Yeah. And we'll see that coming up here in the next couple of months. Those are some of the best and worst case scenarios for your Cowboys rookies heading into the 2023 NFL season.